Luis Rodriguez never expected that a small paper heart would change his entire world. As a single father working night maintenance at Cedar Grove Park, he was just trying to survive another lonely shift when a child's voice pierced through the darkness. "Sir, you dropped your heart." What started as a simple act of kindness from his 7-year-old daughter would spiral into something extraordinary, touching thousands of lives and proving that sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest cough. Miracles. But first, let me tell you about the moment that changed everything. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button for more real, emotional, life-changing stories like this, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The fluorescent lights of the maintenance shed cast harsh shadows across Luis Rodriguez's weathered face as he pulled on his work gloves at 10 p.m. sharp. The familiar weight of exhaustion settled on his shoulders like an old coat, threadbare and uncomfortable but impossible to shed. At 34, Luis carried the kind of tiredness that sleep couldn't cure, the bone-deep weariness that came from being both mother and father to 7-year-old Sophia while working 2 jobs to keep their small, suburban apartment. Cedar Grove Park stretched before him in the moonlight, its playground equipment looking like strange sculptures against the star-dotted sky. The park had been his second home for 3 years now, ever since he'd landed the night maintenance position that paid just enough to cover rent and groceries with little left over. During the day, he worked at Martinez's auto shop, his hands black with grease and his back aching from hunching over engine blocks. At night, he cleaned bathrooms, emptied trash bins, and maintained the grounds that brought joy to so many families during daylight hours. Sophia's lunchbox sat on the passenger seat of his battered Honda Civic, still warm from the dinner she'd packed for him earlier that evening. She'd insisted on making his work food herself, carefully arranging leftover chicken and rice in the small container with the concentration of a master chef. The memory of her tongue poking out in concentration as she folded aluminum foil around a homemade cookie made his chest tight with both love and guilt. She was growing up too fast, taking on responsibilities that should have been his, trying to fill the empty spaces left by a mother who'd walked away when the bills got too high and the dreams too small. "Pappy, I made you something special," Sophia had said that morning, her dark eyes bright with excitement as she held up a construction paper heart, carefully colored red with crayons and decorated with glitter that would probably end up on everything Luis touched. "For the next week. It's for your lunch, so you know I love you, even when you're working." She'd tucked it into his lunchbox with the same care she used to arrange her own school supplies, her small fingers smoothing the edges with precision that broke his heart. Luis had kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and the innocence that still clung to her despite everything they'd been through. "Thank you, mi amor. I'll keep it safe." The words felt heavy with promise, though he hadn't understood their full weight at the time. Now, as he began his nightly rounds, Luis found himself thinking about the conversation with Sophia's teacher earlier that week. Mrs. Chen had pulled him aside after school, her expression gentle but concerned. "Sophia's been quiet lately," she'd said, her voice carefully neutral. "She's not participating in group activities like she used to, and she spends most of her free time alone, drawing or reading. I know things had been difficult at home, and I just wanted you to know that if you need resources, programs that might help." Her voice had trailed off, but Luis had heard the unspoken words, programs for families struggling to make ends meet, for children who needed more than one parent working multiple jobs could provide. The first trash bin was overflowing, families having enjoyed the unusually warm October evening with picnics and playground visits. Luis worked methodically, his movements automatic after thousands of similar nights. Pull the bag, tie it tight, replace the liner, move to the next bin. The rhythm was almost meditative, giving his mind space to wander to the bills stacked on his kitchen counter. The worried calls from Sophia's babysitter about her increasing tendency to sit by the window waiting for him to come home, the way his daughter's laugh had become rarer over the past few months. Cedar Grove Park served the diverse neighborhoods surrounding it, from the luxury condos on the north side to the low-income housing projects on the south. During the day, Luis often watched the interactions between different families, noticing how some children had name-brand clothes and expensive bicycles, while others, like Sophia, made do with handmade downs, and imagination. He'd grown up in these same neighborhoods, had played on these same swings as a child, dreaming of a future that felt both within reach and impossibly distant. The park's central pavilion housed picnic tables and a small stage where community events were held throughout the year. Louis had brought Sophia to several of these gatherings when his schedule allowed, watching her face light up during puppet shows and community talent nights. She'd always been eager to participate, raising her hand to volunteer for games or singing along with the children's choir that performed each spring. But lately, she'd become more withdrawn, preferring to sit close to Louis and observe rather than engage. The change worried him more than he wanted to admit. As Louis made his way toward the playground area, he noticed a light still on in the community center building. The shelter program had been expanded recently, providing temporary housing for families in transition. He'd heard the workers talking about it during his day shifts, how they were seeing more families with children, people who'd been displaced by rising rents and job losses. The knowledge sat heavy in his chest, a reminder of how thin the line was between stability and crisis, how easily he and Sophia could find themselves on the other side of that equation. The playground equipment gleamed dully in the moonlight, swings moving slightly in the evening breeze. Louis had replaced the chains on 2 of the swings just last week, ensuring they were safe for the children who would use them. There was something profoundly satisfying about this work, knowing that his efforts directly contributed to moments of joy for families he'd never meet. When he watched Sophia play during their rare park visits, he felt a deep connection to every parent who'd pushed their child on these swings, every family who'd shared laughter on these slides. The trash bin near the playground was lighter than usual, but as Louis lifted the bag, he felt something shift in his jacket pocket. His lunchbox, which he'd tucked there earlier, had come open slightly. He paused, setting the trash bag down to check its contents. The chicken and rice were still secure, but the paper heart Sophia had made was gone. He patted his other pockets frantically, then began retracing his steps, scanning the ground with the small flashlight he kept clipped to his belt. The paper heart represented more than craft time or childhood whimsy. It was Sophia's way of staying connected to him during the long hours they were apart, her attempt to bridge the gap between their circumstances and her need for security. Louis had promised to keep it safe, and the idea of losing something so precious to his daughter made his chest constrict with panic. He'd already failed her in so many ways, unable to provide the stable home life she deserved, unable to be present for school events or bedtime stories on most nights. This small token of her love felt like something he could protect, something he could do right. "Sir, you dropped your heart." The voice was small and clear, cutting through the night air like a bell. Louis spun around, his flashlight beam sweeping across the playground until it landed on a figure sitting on one of the swings. A girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, was holding up a red paper heart, the glitter catching the light like tiny stars. She wore a thin jacket that had seen better days, and sneakers with holes near the toes, but her smile was radiant, transforming her face with an inner light that made Louis's breath catch. I'm sorry," Louis stammered, approaching slowly. "You startled me. What are you doing out here so late? Where are your parents?" The questions tumbled out, his protective instincts kicking in even as relief flooded through him at the sight of Sophia's heart, safe in the child's hands. The girl held out the paper heart, her movements careful and deliberate. "I saw it fall when you were working. My name is Isabella, and I'm staying over there." She pointed toward the community center. "With my mom. We're visiting." The word carried weight beyond its simple meaning, and Louis understood immediately that this was a child who'd learned to choose her words carefully, to protect herself and her family's privacy, even in vulnerability. "Thank you," Louis said, accepting the heart with gentle hands. "This is very special to me. My daughter made it." He studied Isabella's face in the flashlight beam, noting the way her eyes lingered on the paper heart, the wistful expression that flickered across her features. "Do you like hearts?" Isabella nodded eagerly, her reticence melting away. "I love hearts. I used to make them all the time with my grandma, before we had to move. She taught me how to fold them from paper, and how to make them perfectly symmetrical." Her voice carried a note of loss that made Louis's chest ache. She said hearts were special because they reminded us that love travels with us wherever we go. The wisdom in those words, spoken by a child who couldn't be more than 8, struck Louis with unexpected force. Here was a little girl who'd clearly experienced upheaval and uncertainty, yet she spoke of love with the kind of understanding that usually came from years of living. Her grandmother's lesson had taken root in rich soil, growing into something beautiful despite difficult circumstances. "Ah, your grandmother sounds like a very wise woman," Louis said, crouching down to Isabella's eye level. "Would you like to know a secret about this heart?" Isabella nodded, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Every time I look at it during my work, I feel like my daughter is right here with me. It's like she found a way to fold her love into something I can carry everywhere." Isabella's face lit up with understanding. "That's exactly what my grandma meant. Love that travels with us." She paused, looking down at her hands. "I wish I had a heart like that. Something to remind me that even when things are scary or different, the love is still there." The conversation was interrupted by a woman's voice calling from the direction of the community center. "Isabella, baby, where are you?" The voice carried worry and exhaustion, the particular strain of a parent trying to keep fear at bay while searching for their child. "That's my mom," Isabella said, jumping up from the swing. "I should go. Thank you for letting me help you find your heart." She started to run toward the voice, then turned back. "Sir, maybe tomorrow you could tell me more about hearts that carry love? I'll be here around this time, if that's okay." Louis watched her disappear into the shadows, her words echoing in his mind. The encounter had lasted only a few minutes, but it felt significant in a way he couldn't quite name. There was something about Isabella's combination of childhood wonder and premature wisdom that reminded him of Sophia, of the way his own daughter had learned to navigate their complicated world with grace beyond her years. As he continued his rounds, Louis found himself thinking about the paper heart in his pocket and the connection it had created between him and a little girl he'd never met before. Sophia had intended the heart as a bridge between them, a way to stay connected during their separation. But tonight, it had become something more, a catalyst for human connection in the loneliness of his night shift. The community center had always been just a building to Louis, a place where he occasionally emptied trash bins and checked that the exterior lights were functioning. But now he found himself thinking about the families staying there, the children like Isabella who were navigating uncertainty with remarkable resilience. The thought of Sophia having to experience that kind of displacement made his stomach clench. But it also filled him with admiration for the strength these families displayed. By the time Louis finished his rounds and returned to the maintenance shed, the encounter with Isabella had settled into his bones like a warm drink on a cold night. He sat in his car for a moment before heading home, holding Sophia's paper heart up to the dome light and studying its simple beauty. The red crayon was slightly uneven, the glitter was already starting to shed, and there was a small tear near one edge where it had been folded. It was imperfect and fragile, exactly the kind of thing he might have overlooked in his rush to get through each day. But Isabella's words had changed his perspective. This wasn't just a craft project or a sweet gesture from his daughter. It was a tangible representation of love, carefully created and intentionally shared. Sophia had put thought into every detail, from the choice of red paper to the strategic placement of glitter. She'd folded it with the same care she used for her school projects, understanding instinctively that this heart would carry meaning far beyond its simple construction. The drive home took Louis through neighborhoods he'd known his entire life, past the apartment building where he'd lived as a child, the corner store where he'd bought penny candy with money saved from collecting cans, the church where his grandmother had taken him every Sunday until she passed when he was 15. These streets held the geography of his life, the familiar landmarks of struggle and survival that had shaped him into the man he was today. Sophia was asleep when he arrived home, her small form curled under the blanket his mother had crocheted before her own death 5 years ago. Louis stood in the doorway of their shared bedroom, watching the rise and fall of his daughter's breathing, feeling the familiar tug of love and worry that defined his existence. The babysitter, Mrs. Garcia from down the hall, had left a note saying Sophia had eaten her dinner, completed her homework, and asked 3 times when Pappy would be home. Louis kissed his daughter's forehead gently, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and the innocence that still clung to her despite everything they'd been through. "Te amo, mi corazon," he whispered, using the endearment that had taken on new meaning after tonight's encounter. Sophia stirred slightly, murmuring something unintelligible before settling back into sleep. In the kitchen, Louis made himself a cup of coffee and sat at the small table where he and Sophia shared their meals. The paper heart sat before him, still slightly warm from his pocket, and he found himself thinking about Isabella's words about love that travels. His own mother had tried to teach him similar lessons, though he'd been too young and too angry about their circumstances to fully understand. She'd insisted that love was the one thing that couldn't be taken away by eviction notices or job losses, that it was something they could carry with them through every change and challenge. At the time, Louis had found those words frustrating, wanting practical solutions rather than philosophical comfort. But now, holding his daughter's heart and thinking about a little girl who'd learned to find meaning in small gestures, he began to understand what his mother had been trying to tell him. Love wasn't just a feeling, quote. It was a choice, a practice, a way of moving through the world that could transform even the most difficult circumstances. The idea that had been forming in Louis's mind since his encounter with Isabella began to solidify into something more concrete. If Sophia could fold love into a paper heart, if Isabella could find wisdom in her grandmother's lessons about portable love, then maybe there was something he could do to extend that circle of connection. Maybe the isolation he felt during his night shifts, the sense of being invisible in his own community, didn't have to be permanent. Louis spent the rest of the night thinking about possibilities, about ways to turn his encounter with Isabella into something larger. By the time he needed to get Sophia ready for school, he had the beginnings of a plan that felt both simple and revolutionary. It started with understanding that the park wasn't just a place he worked, but a community space where people from all walks of life came together, where small acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways he'd never imagined. The next morning, Louis woke Sophia with gentle kisses and the promise of pancakes, watching her face light up with the kind of joy that made every sacrifice worthwhile. As she ate breakfast, he told her about meeting Isabella, about how her paper heart had created a moment of connection with a little girl who needed reminding that love travels with us wherever we go. "She sounds nice," Sophia said, syrup dripping from her fork as she spoke. "Maybe we could make her a heart too?" "I have lots of paper, and I've been practicing making them even more beautiful." The offer was made with the casual generosity of childhood, but Louise heard the deeper meaning. Sophia understood instinctively that sharing love multiplied rather than diminished it, that creating something beautiful for a stranger was a gift to both the giver and the receiver. "I think that's a wonderful idea, my amour," Louis said, kissing the top of her head. "But what if we made lots of hearts? What if we made enough to share with anyone who might need reminding that they're loved?" The question hung in the air between them, and Louis watched as Sophia's eyes grew wide with understanding and excitement. "Like a heart project?" Sophia asked, her voice rising with enthusiasm. "We could make different colored hearts and write messages on them and leave them places where people might find them and feel happy." The idea was already taking shape in her mind, and Louis could see the wheels turning as she imagined the possibilities. "Exactly like that," Louis said, feeling something shift in his chest, a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life for longer than he cared to admit. "We could start small, maybe make a few hearts each week, and see what happens. What do you think?" Sophia's response was to jump up from the table and wrap her arms around his neck, squeezing tight enough to make breathing difficult. "I think it's the best idea ever, Pappy. We're going to make so many people happy, and Isabella will know that love really does travel everywhere." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Louis found himself laughing for the first time in weeks, the sound surprising him with its lightness. After dropping Sophia at school, Louis stopped at the dollar store and bought construction paper in every color they had, along with markers, glue sticks, and glitter. The teenage cashier looked at him curiously as he loaded the craft supplies onto the conveyor belt, but Louis just smiled and said he was working on a project with his daughter. The words felt true in a way that made his chest warm with anticipation. During his lunch break at the auto shop, Louis sat in his car, and his car. Practiced folding paper hearts, trying to remember the technique Sophia had shown him. His fingers were clumsy compared to hers, roughened by years of manual labor and less skilled at the precise movements required for paper crafts. But there was something meditative about the process. The way the simple act of folding and creasing required complete attention, shutting out the noise of worries and responsibilities that usually filled his mind. The first heart he made was lopsided and slightly torn, but it held together and looked recognizably heart-shaped. Louis smoothed out the creases and imagined writing a message on it, something simple but meaningful that might brighten someone's day. The possibilities felt endless, and he found himself thinking about different messages for different situations, ways to acknowledge that everyone carried their own struggles and victories. That evening, as Louis prepared for his night shift, Sophia presented him with a small stack of paper hearts she'd made during her after-school time with Mrs. Garcia. Each one was carefully crafted and unique, some decorated with glitter, others with drawn flowers or rainbows. She'd written messages on each one in her careful second-grade handwriting. You are loved. Someone thinks you're special. Your smile makes the world brighter, and love travels with you always. These are for Isabella and anyone else who needs them, Sophia explained, her face serious with the weight of her mission. Mrs. Kane. Garcia helped me with the spelling, and I made sure each message was different, so people would know they're special and not just getting the same thing as everyone else. The thoughtfulness behind her words made Louis's eyes well up with tears. He quickly blinked away. They're perfect, mi amor, he said, carefully placing the hearts in his lunchbox next to the sandwich she'd made him. Isabella is going to be so happy to receive one, and I bet other people will be too. You're doing something really beautiful. Louis arrived at the park that night with a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in months. The familiar routine of his rounds felt different now, charged with purpose beyond simple maintenance. He was no longer just emptying trash bins and cleaning bathrooms. He was preparing the space for acts of kindness, for moments of unexpected connection that might change someone's entire day. Isabella was waiting for him at the playground, sitting on the same swing as the night before. This time, she wasn't alone. A woman sat on the swing beside her, and Louis could see the family resemblance in their dark hair and expressive eyes. The woman looked tired, but alert, watching Louis's approach with the cautious awareness of someone who'd learned to be careful about strangers. This is my mom, Carmen, Isabella said, jumping up from the swing with excitement. I told her about you and the heart, and she said it was okay to talk to you again if you came back. Carmen stood as well, extending her hand with a smile that was worn but reserved. Thank you for being kind to Isabella last night, Carmen said, her voice carrying a slight accent that reminded Louis of his own grandmother. She hasn't stopped talking about the heart and the conversation you had. It's been a while since she's been so excited about something. The admission carried weight, hinting at recent difficulties that had dampened a child's natural enthusiasm. Your daughter is remarkable, Louis said, shaking Carmen's hand. She taught me something important about love and connection that I won't forget. He turned to Isabella, who was practically bouncing with anticipation. Actually, I have something for you, if your mom says it's okay. Carmen nodded, and Louis carefully withdrew one of Sophia's hearts from his lunchbox. It was decorated with rainbow glitter and bore the message, Love travels with you always, in Sophia's careful handwriting. Isabella's eyes grew wide as she accepted the heart, her fingers tracing the glitter with reverence. My daughter made this for you, Louis explained. She's 7, and when I told her about our conversation, she wanted to make sure you had your own heart to carry love with you. Her name is Sophia, and she thinks you sound like someone she'd like to be friends with. Isabella clutched the heart to her chest, and Louis saw tears gathering in her eyes. Tell Sophia thank you, she whispered. Tell her that Isabella thinks she must be the nicest girl in the world, to make something so beautiful for someone she's never met. Carmen's hand found her daughter's shoulder, and Louis noticed that the woman's eyes were also bright with unshed tears. Actually, Louis said, reaching into his lunchbox again, Sophia made several hearts tonight. She thought maybe other people might need them too. Would you like to help me leave them around the park where people might find them? The invitation was offered casually, but Louis held his breath waiting for the response. Isabella looked up at her mother, who nodded after a moment's consideration. "I think that sounds like a wonderful way to spend some time," Carmen said. "Isabella loves projects like this, and it would be good for her to do something creative and helpful." For the next hour, Luis found himself with two companions as he made his rounds. Isabella and Carmen helped him place hearts in strategic locations around the park, thoughtfully choosing spots where they might be discovered by people who needed encouragement. They tucked hearts under park benches, taped them to the inside of gazebos, and placed them on playground equipment where children might find them during their play. With each heart they placed, Isabella grew more animated, her excitement infectious. She had ideas about the best asha, locations, insights about where different types of people might look, and suggestions for making the hearts more visible without being too obvious. Carmen watched her daughter with growing amazement, clearly seeing a side of Isabella that had been dormant for some time. "She hasn't been disengaged in weeks," Carmen confided to Luis as they watched Isabella carefully position a heart on a park bench. "We've been staying at the shelter for about a month now, and it's been hard on her. She's had to leave her school, her friends, everything familiar. Some days, she barely talks, and I've been so worried about her spirit, you know? But tonight, she's like herself again." Luis nodded, understanding the weight of those words. "Sophia went through something similar when her mother left," he said quietly. "Not the same situation, but the same kind of disruption. It took time for her to find her footing again, and honestly, I'm still learning how to help her navigate it all." The admission felt vulnerable, but also necessary. Carmen needed to know she wasn't alone in her struggles. As they continued their circuit of the park, Luis found himself sharing more about his own journey as a single parent, the challenges of working multiple jobs while trying to be present for Sophia, the constant worry about whether he was doing enough. Carmen reciprocated, telling him about the job loss that had led to their current situation, the difficult decision to leave their previous city, the hope that Cedar Grove might offer new opportunities for their family. "I'm a teacher," Carmen said, her voice carrying both pride and frustration. "Or I was. Budget cuts eliminated my position, and the rental market where we were living became impossible. Isabella's father isn't in the picture, so it's just us figuring it out day by day." The parallels to Luis's own situation were striking, and he felt a deep sense of kinship with this woman who was fighting similar battles. By the time they finished placing all of Sophia's hearts, Isabella had transformed from a quiet, cautious child into an animated collaborator, full of ideas and enthusiasm. She'd appointed herself the official heart placement specialist, with strong opinions about optimal locations and visibility factors. Watching her confidence bloom over the course of a single evening made Luis think about the power of purposeful activity, the way contributing to something larger than themselves could restore a sense of agency and joy. "Can we do this again tomorrow?" Isabella asked as they prepared to part ways. "I want to make some hearts too, and I have ideas about messages that might help different kinds of people. Maybe we could make some specifically for kids, and some for grown-ups who look tired, and some for people who seem lonely." Her suggestions showed a remarkable awareness of the various forms of human struggle, the different ways people might need encouragement. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Luis said, looking to Carmen for confirmation. "If it's okay with your mom, we could make this a regular thing, maybe every few nights, depending on how many hearts we can make." Carmen nodded enthusiastically, clearly pleased to see her daughter so engaged and hopeful. As Isabella and Carmen walked back toward the community center, Luis heard Isabella's voice carrying through the night air. "Mom, did you know that love can travel in paper hearts? And that when you give love away, you don't have less of it, you have more?" Carmen's response was too quiet to hear, but Luis saw her bend down to hug her daughter, holding her close in the way that parents do when their children surprise them with wisdom. The encounter left Luis feeling energized in a way he hadn't experienced in months. The simple act of placing paper hearts around the park had created connections he never could have anticipated, revealing the hunger for community and purpose that existed just beneath the surface of his daily routine. He finished his remaining tasks with unusual efficiency, his mind already planning the next phase of what Sophia had dubbed the Heart Project. The next morning, Luis woke Sophia early, and told her about his evening with Isabella and Carmen, describing in detail how her hearts had been received and shared. Sophia listened with rapt attention, her eyes growing brighter with each detail of the story. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, processing the information with the seriousness she applied to all important matters. "Pappy," she said finally, "I think we need to make more hearts. Lots more. And I think we need to make them even more special, with better messages, and maybe different shapes too. What if some people don't like hearts? What if they need stars? Or flowers, or something else?" Her questions revealed a sophisticated understanding of human diversity, the recognition that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to gestures of kindness. "What do you think we should do?" Louis asked, genuinely curious about her ideas. Sophia had proven herself to be remarkably insightful about human nature, and he trusted her instincts about how to expand their project. "Well," Sophia said, settling into her planning mode, "I think we should make a whole bunch of different things, not just hearts. And we should write messages that help with different problems people might have. Like, some people might be sad, and some might be scared, and some might just need to know that somebody notices them." She paused, her brow furrowed in concentration. "And maybe we should put them in places where different kinds of people go. Not just the park." Louis felt a surge of pride at his daughter's thoughtfulness. "Those are excellent ideas, mi amor. Where do you think we should put them besides the park?" Sophia's face lit up with excitement as she began listing possibilities. The library, the grocery store, the bus stop, the laundromat. Anywhere people might be having a difficult day and could use a reminder that they mattered. Over the following weeks, Louis and Sophia fell into a new routine. Every evening after dinner, they would sit at the kitchen table and create paper crafts together, folding hearts and stars and flowers, writing messages of encouragement and hope. Sophia proved to be remarkably prolific, her small hands working with practiced efficiency as she produced dozens of colorful creations. Louis found the activity surprisingly relaxing, the repetitive motions and focus required providing a meditative break from the stresses of his daily life. Their messages evolved from simple affirmations to more specific encouragements. "Your kindness makes a difference. Someone believes in you. You're stronger than you know. Your story matters. And the world is better because you're in it." Sophia insisted on researching different types of encouragement, asking Mrs. Garcia about what made people feel better when they were having hard times, and incorporating that wisdom into their messages. Isabella had become a regular collaborator, meeting Luis and Sophia at the park several evenings a week to help distribute their creations. She brought her own artistic contributions, messages written in both English and Spanish, decorative elements that showed increasing sophistication and creativity. Carmen often joined them, and the four of them had developed an efficient system for strategic placement throughout the park and surrounding neighborhood. The hearts and other paper crafts began appearing in locations throughout Cedar Grove, tucked into library books, taped to bus stop benches, left on grocery store shelves, and placed in dozens of other locations where people might discover them during their daily routines. Luis, Sophia, and Isabella had become guerrilla artists of kindness, spreading their message through the community with the dedication of a grassroots movement. The first sign that their project was having a broader impact came when Louis overheard two women talking at the auto shop about finding paper hearts with encouraging messages. One had discovered a heart in her library book just when she was feeling overwhelmed by job hunting, and the other had found one at the bus stop during a particularly difficult week. They were trying to figure out who was responsible for what they dubbed the mystery hearts, speculating about whether it was a church group, a school project, or some other organized effort. Louis said nothing, but he felt a warm glow of satisfaction at hearing that their efforts were reaching people and making a difference. That evening, he shared the overheard conversation with Sophia, who was delighted to learn that strangers were talking about their project. "That means it's working, Pappy," she exclaimed. "People are finding them and feeling better, just like we hoped." The project took on a life of its own as word spread through the community. Louis began noticing people looking more carefully at their surroundings, checking places where hearts might be hidden, smiling when they discovered one of the colorful messages. Children at the park would search for hearts as part of their play, and adults would point them out to their companions with expressions of delight and curiosity. Isabella reported similar observations from her perspective. "People at the shelter are talking about them too," she told Luis one evening as they worked on a new batch of creations. "Some of the kids found hearts in the library books they checked out, and the grown-ups are wondering who's doing it. Everyone thinks it's really nice, and some people are keeping the hearts they found like treasures." The feedback inspired them to expand their efforts even further. Sophia suggested adding seasonal themes, creating hearts with autumn leaves for October, snowflakes for winter, and flowers for spring. Isabella contributed bilingual messages and cultural elements that reflected the diversity of their community. Carmen, who had secured a substitute teaching position, offered insights about child development and age-appropriate messaging. Luis found that the project was changing him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The act of creating something beautiful and meaningful each evening provided a sense of purpose that extended beyond his work and parenting responsibilities. He felt more connected to his community, more aware of the people around him and their potential struggles. The simple act of folding paper and writing encouraging messages had become a form of meditation, a way to process his own stress while creating something positive for others. 3 months after their first encounter, Isabella brought exciting news to their evening craft session. "A teacher at the community center found one of our hearts and posted about it on social media," she announced, her eyes bright with excitement. She took a picture of it and wrote about how it made her day better, and lots of people are commenting about finding them too. Luis felt a moment of panic at the thought of their quiet project being exposed to wider scrutiny, but Sophia's reaction was pure joy. "That's wonderful," she exclaimed. "Now even more people will know about love traveling in paper hearts, and maybe they'll start making their own." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Luis found his anxiety melting away as he considered the positive implications of greater visibility. The social media post, shared by Maria Santos, a local elementary school teacher, included a photo of a paper heart decorated with Isabella's distinctive glitter technique and featuring the message, "Your bra. Kindness creates ripples of joy." The post read, "Found this beautiful surprise tucked into a library book today, and it completely turned around my difficult morning. Someone in our community is spreading love and encouragement through these handmade hearts, and I wanted to share this reminder that small acts of kindness can have enormous impact. Thank you, Mystery Heart Maker, for the gift of hope. Hashtag Cedar Grove Hearts, hashtag Kindness Matters, hashtag Community Love." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the post had been shared dozens of times, with people commenting about their own heart discoveries and expressing gratitude for the anonymous kindness. Some shared photos of hearts they'd found. Others posted about how the messages had arrived at exactly the right moment in their lives. The hashtag Cedar Grove Hearts began trending in their local social media community, creating a digital gathering place for people to share their experiences and appreciation. Luis watched the online response with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. What had started as a simple project between a father and daughter had somehow touched dozens of people, creating a network of connection and positivity that extended far beyond their original scope. The comments revealed stories of personal struggle and triumph, of people finding hope in unexpected places, of a community hungry for authentic connection in an increasingly disconnected world. One comment particularly moved him. "I found a heart at the bus stop last week. When I was on my way to a job interview, I was sure I'd fail. The message said, 'You're stronger than you know,' and somehow it gave me the confidence I needed. I got the job, and I've been carrying that heart in my wallet ever since. Thank you, whoever you are, for believing in a stranger." Another read, "My teenage daughter found a heart in her library book during a really tough time at school. She's been struggling with anxiety, and finding that message about her story mattering helped her open up to me about what she's been going through. These little acts of kindness are changing lives." The stories continued to pour in throughout the week, each one adding weight to the realization that their small project had become something much larger than they'd ever imagined. Luis found himself reading the comments during his breaks at work, sharing the most touching ones with Sophia each evening. both of them amazed by the ripple effects of their simple gestures. "Pappy," Sophia said one evening, as they sat at their kitchen table surrounded by craft supplies, "I think we need to make even more hearts now. Look at all these people who found them and felt better. What if there are more people who need them but haven't found any yet?" Her logic was irrefutable, and Louis found himself nodding in agreement, even as he wondered how they could possibly keep up with the growing demand. The solution came from an unexpected source. Carmen approached Louis during one of their evening sessions at the park, her expression thoughtful and slightly nervous. "I've been thinking about the social media response," she said, "and I have an idea. What if we organized a community event, like a heart-making workshop where people could learn to create their own and take the Cebulin project even further?" Isabella bounced with excitement at her mother's suggestion. "We could teach everyone how to fold hearts and write good messages, and then there would be hundreds of hearts all over Cedar Grove, and everyone would know that love travels everywhere." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Louis found himself considering the possibilities. "Where would we hold something like that?" Louis asked, practical concerns tempering his excitement. "And how would we let people know about it?" The logistics seemed daunting, but the potential impact was undeniable. Carmen smiled, and Louise realized she'd already been thinking through the details. "The community center has a meeting room they let people use for free events," she explained. "And Maria Santos, the teacher who posted about the heart, reached out to me through social media. She wants to help organize something, and she thinks the school district might be interested in incorporating the project into their community service requirements." End quote. The idea gained momentum quickly. Maria Santos proved to be an enthusiastic collaborator, bringing organizational skills and community connections that transformed their informal project into a structured event. She created a Facebook event page, designed flyers for distribution throughout the neighborhood, and coordinated with local businesses to donate supplies. Louis found himself thrust into a leadership role he'd never sought, but felt surprisingly comfortable inhabiting. His natural warmth and genuine passion for the project made him an effective spokesperson, and his story as a single father trying to create positive change resonated with many community members. Sophia, initially shy about the attention, blossomed under the encouragement of adults who praised her creativity and compassion. The first heart-making workshop was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in January, and Louis spent the week leading up to it alternating between excitement and terror. What if no one showed up? What if people expected more than they could deliver? What if the magic of their quiet project disappeared under the harsh light of public scrutiny? His fears proved groundless. The community center meeting room filled to capacity, with people of all ages eager to learn the art of paper heart creation and message writing. Families came together, teenagers arrived with groups of friends, and senior citizens brought their grandchildren. The diversity of participants reflected the broad appeal of the project and the universal human need for connection and purpose. Louis watched in amazement as Sophia demonstrated folding techniques to a group of attentive adults, her confidence growing with each successful instruction. Isabella moved between tables, helping people with decorative elements and sharing her insights about message writing. Carmen coordinated supplies and provided encouragement to participants who doubted their artistic abilities. The workshop exceeded everyone's expectations. Participants created hundreds of hearts, stars, and flowers, each one unique and meaningful. More importantly, they shared stories about why the project mattered to them, creating connections that went far beyond the simple act of paper folding. Louise overheard conversations about community involvement, mental health awareness, and the importance of small acts of kindness in combating isolation and despair. "This is incredible," Maria Santos said to Louise as they surveyed the room full of engaged participants. "I'd been teaching for 15 years, and I've never seen a community event generate this kind of authentic enthusiasm. You've tapped into something really special here." The success of the first workshop led to monthly events, each one drawing new participants and generating fresh ideas for expanding the project. People began creating themed hearts for holidays and special occasions, organizing heart placement walks through different neighborhoods, and developing partnerships with local businesses and organizations. The Cedar Grove Hearts Project, as it came to be known, attracted attention from beyond their immediate community. Local news stations featured stories about the grassroots kindness movement, and social media amplified their message to audiences across the region. Lewis found himself being interviewed by reporters, speaking at school assemblies, and corresponding with people in other cities who wanted to start similar projects. The media attention brought both opportunities and challenges. Lewis was offered speaking engagements at conferences, invitations to appear on television programs, and requests for interviews from national publications. While he appreciated the recognition, he worried about losing sight of the project's original purpose and the simple connections that had made it meaningful. "I don't want this to become about me," he confided to Carmen during one of their evening planning sessions. "The whole point was to create something that helped people connect with each other, not to make me some kind of spokesperson for kindness." Carmen nodded understanding, having watched Luis struggle with the balance between promoting the project and maintaining his privacy. Sophia, however, had no such reservations. She embraced the attention with the natural confidence of a child who'd found her purpose. When a local television reporter asked her why she thought the project had become so popular, she answered with characteristic directness, "Because everyone needs to know they're loved, and sometimes grown-ups forget how to tell each other that. Hearts help people remember." The simplicity and truth of her response resonated with viewers, and the clip became one of the most shared segments in the station's history. Lewis watched his daughter's television debut with a mixture of pride and amazement, recognizing in her the same wisdom that had first drawn him to Isabella's insights about love that travels. As the project continued to grow, Lewis began to see changes in his own life that extended beyond the satisfaction of community service. The connections he'd made through the Heart Project had created a support network he'd never had before. Carmen had become a close friend and eventually something more, their shared commitment to the project evolving into a relationship that enriched both their lives and their children's. Isabella and Sophia had developed a friendship that transcended their different circumstances, united by their shared creativity and commitment to spreading kindness. Watching them collaborate on new heart designs and message ideas reminded Lewis of the power of purposeful friendship, the way shared values could create bonds that withstand external pressures. The project also provided practical benefits that Lewis hadn't anticipated. The media attention had led to job opportunities, speaking engagements that supplemented his income, and connections with people who could help him advance his career. More importantly, it had given him a sense of identity beyond his roles as father and worker, recognition as someone who could create positive change in his community. But perhaps the most significant change was internal. The daily practice of creating something beautiful and meaningful had shifted Lewis's perspective on his own life and circumstances. Instead of seeing himself as someone struggling to survive, he began to understand himself as someone with valuable gifts to offer. The project had revealed strengths he didn't know he possessed: leadership, creativity, the ability to inspire others and organize complex initiatives. A year after their first encounter at the park, Lewis and Isabella sat together on the same swings where she'd first returned his paper heart. The park looked different now, marked by subtle signs of the project's impact. Heart-shaped decorations adorned the playground equipment, and a small memorial garden had been planted in honor of project participants who'd passed away. "Do you ever think about how different things would be if you hadn't dropped that heart?" Isabella asked, her voice carrying the thoughtfulness that had always characterized her observations. At 9 years old, she had a sophisticated understanding of cause and effect, the way small moments could reshape entire lives. Lewis considered the question seriously, trying to imagine what his life might have looked like without the Heart Project. He would still be working his 2 jobs, still struggling to make ends meet, still feeling isolated and overwhelmed by the challenges of single parenthood. But more than that, he would have missed the opportunity to discover his own capacity for leadership and community building. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember that the heart was always there. The love was always there. We just needed the right moment to recognize it and share it with others. Maybe if it hadn't been that night, it would have been some other time. Some other time. Way." Isabella nodded, her expression serious. "My mom says that some people are meant to be bridges, to help other people connect with each other. She thinks you and Sophia are bridge people, and that's why the project worked so well." The observation was remarkably mature, and Louis felt a familiar surge of admiration for this child, who consistently surprised him with her wisdom. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sophia and Carmen, returning from a supply run to prepare for the next day's workshop. Sophia carried a box of new craft materials donated by local businesses, while Carmen held a folder of correspondence from other communities interested in starting their own heart projects. "Look what we got," Sophia announced, displaying a collection of specialty papers and decorative elements that would allow for even more creative heart designs. "And Mrs. Santos said that 3 more schools want to make heart projects part of their community service programs." Her excitement was infectious, and Louis found himself smiling at her enthusiasm. The evening's workshop preparation became a family affair, with the 4 of them working together to organize supplies, review messages, and plan distribution strategies. Louis watched the easy collaboration between Carmen and Isabella, the way they anticipated each other's needs and worked in comfortable synchronization. His relationship with Carmen had developed slowly and naturally, built on shared values and mutual respect rather than romantic fantasy. Their combined family had created something stable and nurturing for both Sophia and Isabella, providing the security and support that single-parent households often lacked. The girls had embraced their roles as sisters, sharing everything from craft supplies to childhood secrets. Louis and Carmen had found in each other partners who understood the challenges of single parenthood and the importance of creating meaningful work beyond mere survival. As they worked, Louis reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. The paper heart that had fallen from his lunchbox had been more than a simple craft project. It had been a catalyst for transformation, a small act of love that had grown into something capable of touching thousands of lives. The project had taught him that impact wasn't measured by grand gestures or dramatic interventions, but by consistent, authentic efforts to make the world a little kinder. The Heart Project had also revealed the hunger for connection that existed in their community, the way people were eager to participate in something meaningful when given the opportunity. The workshops had become more than craft sessions. They were gathering places where neighbors met each other, where isolated individuals found community, where children learned the value of service and compassion. Louis had been invited to speak at a national conference on community building, an opportunity that would have seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. The boy who had grown up in the same neighborhoods he now served, who had struggled with poverty and limited opportunities, was being recognized as an expert in grassroots organizing and social change. But more than the external recognition, Louis valued the internal transformation the project had created. He no longer saw himself as someone things happened to, but as someone who could make things happen. The confidence that had grown through the Heart Project had infected other areas of his life, leading to a promotion at the auto shop, increased speaking opportunities, and a sense of agency he'd never possessed before. The national conference presentation was scheduled for the following month, and Louis spent his evenings preparing remarks that would capture the essence of the Heart Project without losing its human scale. He wanted to convey the importance of starting small, of building authentic connections, of recognizing that everyone had something valuable to contribute to community building. "What are you going to tell them about why it worked?" Sophia asked one evening as she helped him practice his presentation. At 8 years old, she had become one of his most trusted advisors, her insights consistently valuable, and her feedback honest and direct. "I think I'm going to tell them about you," Louis said, watching her face light up with surprise and pleasure. About how a 7-year-old girl knew exactly what her father needed to feel loved during his work, and how that simple act of care started something that changed our whole community. Sophia's smile was radiant, and Louis felt the familiar surge of love and pride that characterized his relationship with his remarkable daughter. The conference presentation was a success, leading to additional speaking opportunities and requests for consultation from communities across the country. Louis found himself traveling to share the Heart Project story, always emphasizing the importance of local leadership and authentic connection. He insisted that successful community building couldn't be imported or replicated exactly, but had to grow from the specific needs and strengths of each place. Each presentation included Sophia's original paper heart, now carefully preserved in a frame, along with stories about Isabella, Carmen, and the hundreds of people who had contributed to the project's growth. Lewis had learned that people connected with personal stories rather than abstract principles, that the human elements of the project were what made it memorable and inspiring. The success of the Heart Project had created opportunities Lewis had never imagined, but it had also taught him the importance of staying grounded in the original purpose. No matter how large the project grew, how many communities adopted similar initiatives, or how much recognition he received, the core remained the same: the simple act of one person reaching out to another with prayer, love, and encouragement. 3 years after Isabella had first called out, "Sir, you dropped your heart," Lewis stood before an audience of community leaders and activists, holding up the original paper heart Sophia had made. The auditorium was filled with people eager to learn about grassroots organizing and social change, but Lewis began his presentation with the simple truth that it started everything. "This story begins with a little girl who wanted her father to know he was loved," he said, his voice carrying across the room with quiet authority. "It's about the power of small acts of care, the way love can travel through paper hearts and human connections, and the remarkable things that happen when we pay attention to the people around us who need encouragement." As he spoke, Lewis thought about Isabella, now 11 years old and serving as a junior mentor in their monthly workshops. He thought about Carmen, who had become not just his partner, but his closest collaborator in expanding the project's reach. He thought about Sophia, whose initial act of love had grown into a movement that touched thousands of lives. But mostly, he thought about the moment in the park when a child's voice had called out through the darkness, returning something precious he hadn't realized he'd lost. The paper heart had been just the beginning. The real heart, the one that truly mattered, had been growing all along, expanding to encompass not just his daughter's love, but the love of an entire community, united in the simple belief that kindness could change the world. The presentation concluded with a standing ovation, but Lewis's thoughts were already turning toward home, toward the evening workshop where new participants would learn to fold paper hearts and write messages of encouragement. The cycle continued, each heart carrying forward the message that love travels with us always, that small acts of kindness can become movements of hope, and that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the quote, "simplest gestures." As Lewis packed up his presentation materials, he carefully placed Sophia's original heart back in its protective case. It had traveled thousands of miles, been seen by countless people, and helped inspire dozens of similar projects across the country. But its most important journey had been the shortest one, from a 7-year-old girl's hands to her father's heart, carrying with it the reminder that love is always worth sharing, always worth protecting, and always capable of creating something beautiful in the world. The Heart Project continued to grow and evolve, but its essence remained unchanged. The simple recognition that everyone deserves to know they are loved, that small acts of kindness can have enormous impact, and that communities are built one connection at a time. In a world often characterized by division and isolation, the project stood as proof that people hunger for authentic connection and are willing to work together to create positive change. Lewis returned home to Cedar Grove that evening to find Sophia and Isabella working on a new batch of hearts, their heads bent together in concentration as they perfected a new folding technique. Carmen was preparing dinner, and the familiar sounds of family life filled the apartment that had once felt too small and too lonely. The transformation was complete, but the work continued, each day bringing new opportunities to share love, create connection, and remind the world that kindness is always possible. The paper heart that had fallen from his lunchbox on that lonely night 3 years ago had been just the beginning. The real heart, the one that truly mattered, had been growing all along, expanding to encompass not just his daughter's love, but the love of an entire community, united in the simple belief that small acts of kindness can, indeed, change the world. And in the end, that belief had proven to be absolutely, wonderfully true.